Rousey. Atop of today's news are comments from former WWE announcer Jimmy Smith concerning what he claims was a general hatred for Ronda Rousey in both WWE and the UFC. I've never been a religious person. One of the things I've always said about God, he gets all the credit, none of the blame. That's what Ronda Rousey wants, all the credit, none of the blame. I want credit for all my wins, my losses. I had CTE. I think Camille is a great wrestler. We followed her very closely. She's worked with a lot of top talent. As for her status, I can't comment to that, but I think she's a tremendous talent and would be an asset to any wrestling company for sure, including Tony likely wants to keep Cavill, signing a big surprise, especially if he's working to make sure that she has a strong debut and equally strong program. Has expanded its women's roster and all this and all that. I'm the greatest to ever do it, but when it didn't work, it credit to the people who actually beat her. The idea that I left MMA and went to WWE because I had a concussion problem makes no sense. Ringside News also summarized some of Smith's other comments made on SiriusXM's Behind the Cage. Smith claimed that many backstage personnel in WWE and UFC had a negative view of Rousey. It revealed that these individuals took pleasure in her consecutive losses to Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, suggesting that they were rooting against her due to her attitude and behavior. Smith, a former MMA Fighter 10 broadcaster, added that he normally doesn't discuss backstage matters. However, it appears he felt Rousey's comments needed to be addressed, and according to Smith via Ringside News, Rousey had a tendency to push around or talk down to those staff members, creating an environment of distaste among those who worked with her. What do you guys think of everybody hating Ronda Rousey? Let us know in the comments down below. Next up is Camille headed to AEW. There's been plenty of free agent signings in 2024, and now it appears former NWA Women's Champion Camille is headed to AEW. A Fivefold Select has reported that Camille has signed with and has been under contract since February. The former NWA Women's Champion, who held the title for over 800 days, had spoken with the WWE about coming to work for the company. There was speculation about whether the 31-year-old grappler would have to begin on NXT if she signed with WWE. That's apparently a moot point. Khan recently appeared on ZOO with Josh Martinez and had this to say about Camille: with recent signings such as Mercedes Moné, has expanded its women's roster with recent signings such as Mercedes Moné and Anna Pozzo, and Camille should be another fantastic acquisition. Seems to be working hard to improve its women's division, and this steady influx of talent could help it become a respectable part of the promotion as fans look forward to women's matches, much like many fans in the WWE do with his female talent. Next up, The Undertaker talks red heat with CM Punk. CM Punk can be a polarizing figure at times, so what happened when The Undertaker had to discuss wrestling protocol with a Shred superstar, and did this lead to some heat between the two? During a Q&A, The Undertaker recently discussed the rumored heat he had with Punk, explaining there was only an instance he could recall where things might have been tense. The Phenom noted how interactions are often blown out of proportion before he detailed what happened. So we had an initiative at one point where they wanted us, the wrestlers, went traveling, to dress a little bit nicer. They wanted us in business casual with a really relaxed viewpoint on the casual. I think we might have been in Europe, I'm not sure where we were at. I wanted to say we were somewhere in Europe, and I was getting off the bus and getting ready to go to the arena, and I just stopped him because he was dressing like Punk did back in the day, whatever it was. You may recall the WWE's dress policy from several years back, and as taking notes I was like, hey man, none of us like having to dress like this, but I think you're getting a little bit of heat with the boys. You just might want to think about dressing a little better. If I recall correctly, he says, well, what about Cena? I may have replied, you're not Cena, there's nothing wrong with that. Tiger and Punk had a big match at Wrestlemania 29, but apparently Punk was expecting more, at least according to Taker. I guess he thought he should have been the main event when we worked at Wrestlemania against somebody else, not against me. Then when he works with me, I'm not sure if he thought that he should have went over, but I mean, he's got confidence in himself, so why don't? Working wise, I mean, perfect, and that's all I care about. At the end of the day, you don't have to like me, you don't have to be best friends, but somehow or another it got all blown out of proportion that like Undertaker hates CM Punk. No, I don't. I try not to give people the power of hate. Taker is a highly respected figure in the wrestling world. For years he informally dealt with problems between wrestlers. What do you guys think of how Taker handled things with Punk? Do you think there was any heat between either superstar, or was this a case of a mountain out of a molehill? Next up, the WWE draft disappoint The Undertaker. The 2024 WWE draft turned out to be a mixed bag for fans, as a consensus seems to be that night 1 was a complete dud while KN2 was somewhat of an improvement. The biggest complaint is that there were no major moves between any of the brands, and the draft seemed to be more about keeping stars than drafting top stars. Now Taker sharing his thoughts on this year's draft, saying saying, you know what it missed for me, I wanted to see some deals made right, you know what I'm saying, like a lot of teams they WA quarterback, they trade up or they trade down. The WWE limited some major moves by restricting champions from being drafted. The surprise announcement that Roman Reigns had withdrawn from the draft was puzzling, as there was no significant explanation made about how he could do this or what it meant. There was also the puzzling situation where the women's tag team champions were drafted just by the men's tag team champions being exempt. Calling the draft a muddled mess might be an understatement for fans, but Taker continued on saying, you know that would to be me more compelling to watch. You're expecting your fan base to watch 2 nights of TV content, and I mean, to be completely honest, there wasn't a whole lot of change really. Sometimes long-running episodic shows focus more on the illusion of change, but the WWE draft failed to pull that off too. What do you think about the draft, and is there a way to actually improve it? Next up, is there hope for the draft? While there was a disappointment with the draft, they may be hope according to WrestleVotes, as he tweeted. Sources indicate that WWE is generally pleased with the draft results and how everything played out on TV. I've been told that they don't want to do too much high-level shuffling, as it was satisfied with the pre-draft breakdowns at the top of the card. It's worth mentioning that a trade or two is expected before Monday's roster locking deadline. Now, it doesn't make sense for the WWE to carry out a trade off camera when the purpose of the draft was to mark it as an important event. Is the WWE doing damage control with the rumored move? Next up, a new championship coming to NXT, and there's a new title coming to NXT, and with that also comes a question of whether Raw or Smackdown will follow. The Black and Gold brand's lead NXT general manager announced on the 30th of April NXT that there will be a 12W women tournament to crown the inaugural NXT North American Women's Championship. Russell Talk reported the 12 stars that impress the most will advance to 6 qualifying matches to determine who will ultimately face off in a ladder match at NXT Battleground to determine the first women's North American champion. This new title opens the discussion about whether the expected his deal to not be renewed. Scripps is a talented and charismatic worker who caught many fans by surprise when he went from playing a background role as Corella Celia Reggie into an in-ring performer capable of some incredible acrobatic moves, and then he took on the script character when he went to NXT, but despite an initial push never seemed to get any direction. They have it, folks, the wildest news stories and rumors you need to know. Be sure to leave your comments down below. I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content. Main roster needs a secondary title for the women's division. There have been repeated calls for the women's Intercontinental and United States Championship to give the women's undercard another belt to contend for. This makes sense as the WWE is a solid lineup of main event women, but its women's undercard is often underutilized except in minor feuds. A secondary title could help the female superstars develop their skills and get over with the fans, with the ultimate goal of elevating some to the main event. Such a title could help the WWE test its female superstars to see who is ready for further push without throwing them into the main event when they aren't ready. Do you think WWE should add a secondary women's championship on Raw and SmackDown? Let us know in the comments down below. And finally, an NXT superstar set to leave in June. And last but not least, it appears NXT superstar Scripps is leaving the WWE in June, at least according to a report from Fightful Select. Sean Rossap. Fightful Select has learned that Scripps, formerly known as Reggie, contract is set to expire at the start of June. He's been informed that the deal will be expiring and he'll be a free agent. Fightful Sean Rossap has learned that Scripps, who will likely go by Sydney A, plans to continue wrestling in